You're a tyrant, you're a tyrant, you're a tyrant, and you're a goddamn tyrant. Fuck you, you piece of shit. You're a piece of shit.
Is this what is bringing people together, Robert? Is that bringing people together?
That was a moment from last night's meeting of the Red Hook Town Board, where a historic vote was taken regarding the Red Hook Boat Club. Welcome to a special episode of The Catch-Up, a podcast from the Daily Catch where we take you inside the news. My name is Walter Mullen, and I'm the publisher of the Daily Catch.
And I'm Emily Sachar, the editor of the Daily Catch.
Emily, we don't normally record our podcast on Wednesday morning, and right now this is our second podcast this week. We're recording today because of last night's board meeting that was very important and very historic. Why don't you tell listeners why we're here in the studio recording again today?
Yes, well, we had a historic vote, as you said last night, by a vote of 3-2. The town board voted to take the Red Hook Boat Club, a private boat club in Barrytown that sits on about 610 linear feet along the Hudson River, by eminent domain. A very unusual action. Taking property by eminent domain is not something that happens often. It's not taken lightly. And we're here today to talk about why that action was taken, and for the first time to share with our listeners what those explanations from town board members sounded like. We heard last night for the first time from each of the town board members, only one of whom we'd heard from previously, giving her precise rationale for the decision.
So you were at the meeting last night, so why don't we start by telling listeners how many people were there, what the room was like, and start us off there.
Great. So I actually arrived early to the meeting, about 20 minutes early, and I was surprised to see how many people were already out in front of the building. And apparently, starting at about 2 or 3 yesterday afternoon in the blistering heat, a number of boat club members and their friends had been out in front holding signs, and there were people honking their horns and so forth as they drove by. So that's how the evening started. We all went inside. It was very quickly, the room was filled. There's seating for about 60 people. We filled it to, I think about 100 people were there, standing room only, many people out on the street or out on the sidewalk in front of the building, standing there waiting. There was a police presence. There were initially, I think, 3 police officers. By the time that things really got going, I counted 5 police officers, and in addition, Lieutenant Patrick Hildenbrand of the Red Hook Police was in the back of the room. It was a very contentious atmosphere, a lot of yelling, a lot of finger pointing. There were some dramatic gestures made by some people from the boat club toward the supervisor, Robert McKeon, some yelling. There were some curses. We don't need to repeat them on the air, but people can go back and listen to the Panda broadcast in a couple of days. And we will be having as well from this podcast, we will be playing for you some sound bites along the way.
Were there any people in the audience who were in support of the measure?
Well, we don't know. There was a 15-minute public spoken portion of the meeting right before there was the actual moving of the issue to the floor for discussion and vote. And we don't know who in the audience may have had views one way or the other, but of the people who spoke, it was the continuing, the same names and people we've seen before and the same arguments that we've heard before.
So after the 15-minute public speaking, what then happened at the meeting?
So then, very traditional kind of thing, the supervisor went through several of the documents that the town board has previously looked at for a vote on each of them. So one was the EAF, the Environmental Assessment Form. Then there was another form, the Local Waterfront Revitalization Program form. This is the form that the planning board had reviewed and had found wanting on 6 of the 44 LWRP policies. The town board had decided last week, as we already reported, that after considering those objections, they were going to overrule them. So those were both voted on and moved into position, and then we began the real meat of the meeting.
So there were 5 members of the town board. There's Supervisor Robert McKeon, there's Deputy Supervisor Bill Hamill, Jacob Testa, Christine Kane, and Julia Solomon.
That's correct.
Why don't you go through perhaps and talk about the comments each of them made and how they voted?
Okay, so yes, and I'm going to take them a little out of order. The issue was moved to the floor by Bill Hamill, the deputy supervisor, as you mentioned. And Deputy Supervisor Hammoud took us on a bit of a history lesson. He raised the history of eminent domain in the United States by talking about the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, part of the Bill of Rights. He talked about the authoring of that Bill of Rights by James Madison. He talked to us about Dwight Eisenhower, whose 1953 inaugural address resonated with Mr. Hammoud. And then he said something really interesting that elicited a tremendous reaction from the crowd. He said that he felt that it was time for the citizens of Red Hook to stop mooching, his word, on the parks of other communities that have riverfront access. And maybe we can play that clip for our readers and our listeners.
So personally, I find it a little bit embarrassing that we at Red Hook have been having to mooch from our neighbors for riverfront friends for fucking what they did to say you have to mooch.
You piece of shit. Our veterans, our families fought, came back and built it.
Ask you to please not interrupt him.
We found it. Go with somebody else. It's a we have a board like this.
And we've got a lot of comments from a lot of people suggesting that we continue that.
Where are they?
Then he decided, he said he was moving the issue to the floor. He engaged in a bit of a back and forth with the audience, trying to get his message out. He was mocked at times, he was argued with at times, but he just kept going, and it was kind of a humbling thing to watch. He tried to listen, I think, to what was being said to him, but he did have a response to each and every thing that was said. He also criticized the boat club and said that they had been intransigent and hadn't come to the table for conversation with the town board. There's been a lot of back and forth, Walter, about who should have made the first move once it became clear early this year that the town board wanted to take the boat club by eminent domain. Why didn't the boat club come to talk about it? The boat club feels that, well, why should we initiate that? You want to take our boat club. We're sitting here happily doing our thing, taking care of our property. It's on you. So we heard references to that last night yet again. So that was the first speaker. It went on for a number of minutes, I'd say about 15 minutes before Mr. Hammoud had his prepared remarks completely out on the table.
And then and then he turned it over to other board members to speak?
Yeah, so then we had to get a second, and this had all been clearly pre-arranged. And the second came from Jacob Testa. There had been some hope. For example, Farmer Ken Migliorelli had issued a challenge to Jacob Testa at the beginning of the meeting during that public speaking portion to buck with the trend and go in opposition to the town supervisor, Robert McKeon. But no, Mr. Testa towed that line with Hammoud and Supervisor McKeon in saying that he too supported the eminent domain action. We'll play a clip.
This action is not taking someone's home, nor is it converting property for a private developer's commercial benefit. It is not displacing a community, a cemetery, or any of the other extreme misuses or abuses of eminent domain that have been cited by some throughout this process.
He said that he had spoken to several citizens, a number of them, he said, who supported the eminent domain action and who wanted access to the club. And he said the time is now to do this, and it's an important move to make. I want to back up on one point that came up again and again and again last night, the question of need and necessity versus want. Is it a need to have a boat club for the citizens of Red Hook, or is it a want? Jacob Testa felt it was a want that had become a need, and Mr. Hammoud felt the same way. He said, we've moved from the time where a want has become a need. So this was a refrain that we heard again and again.
Did they have any evidence to back that up?
Just language from the LWRP. So that was another point, Walter, that came up several times, which was the town board members who voted in support saying they weren't just doing this for their own edification. They were doing this because they felt that the documents that guide the town, the planning documents, the local waterfront revitalization program document, these are very long, extensive documents, some of which date to 1995, that these are the guiding principles, almost like our own beacon for the future. They spoke about it with poetry, that these are the documents that guide us. These are the documents we have to listen to. And this came up several times last night in a way that I haven't quite heard it articulated before.
Was there any discussion of these documents being 30 years old?
Yeah, with pride, actually, those documents were mentioned. And with a nod to kind of the forebears, the people who came before us. And Robert McKeon almost made note that this is not this town board that has made this decision. This is a decision that's almost being handed down to us and urged upon us, almost like somebody else is inhabiting us today and we need to answer to them. Whether we agree with that and whether our listeners agree with that is another matter. Whether the boat club agrees with it, certainly they do not. But this is the defense, if it were, as it were, that the town board gave, that some of them gave to their decisions.
Why don't we continue to go through the rest of the town board members and how they spoke and how they voted?
Yeah, so after that, Robert McKeon himself punted to Julia Solomon. And Julia Solomon came out in April in opposition to the eminent domain action. She said something interesting, however, last night. She said that her opposition did not rest with the way that the town board was considering the LWRP. She felt that the LWRP was being answered correctly by the action. And she said that the environmental assessment form also was handled correctly by the town. So she did not take issue with the environmental aspects of the eminent domain action. She took issue with the way. The means. She said the means in this case don't justify the ends. And we'll have a clip from her as well at this moment.
I have already publicly stated my opposition to pursuing acquisition of these parcels via eminent domain, so I won't repeat my position in detail now. As you know, I support the goal of increasing public access to the Hudson River and the establishment of a waterfront park in town that is available to all residents. Furthermore, I believe that this location is the best alternative for doing that. This is really what it comes down to for me, however. My personal feeling is that in this situation, that simply does not justify the means. And that is the reason that I will be voting no.
Interesting to hear what she had to say.
Thank you. Yes. And then we turned to Christine Caine, and she was the real wild card of the evening. And there's a reason for that. Christine Caine is up for re-election this November, and a Democratic caucus that was held in May will be repeated this Sunday at the Red Hook High School for the Performing Arts. At that first caucus, she was defeated by the two new political upstarts, Christina Ducharme, the architect, and Kenny Migliorelli, who I mentioned earlier, the well-known farmer, who are in opposition to the eminent domain action. And people have been curious, now that she has a second bite at the apple, whether Christine Caine would, after voting to move this process along, would actually vote for or against eminent domain. And as it came out, she was frustrated, clearly, by the rumors and the comments that had ascribed motive to her vote, which was in opposition to eminent domain. And she wanted to make clear, she said, that she has questioned and been suspect of eminent domain since the moment it was brought to the floor earlier this year. And she spoke extemporaneously. She did not read a message the way every other town board member did. Robert McKeon at the longer end at 9 minutes, Hamill at roughly 15, and Julia Solomon at a very trim 42 seconds. We had something a little bit longer, about 4 minutes extemporaneous from Christine Caine, who made clear that she did not think this was the time or the action to be taken. And she voted against.
But just to recap, prior to the caucus in May, Christine Caine did not make her opinion public. She lost the caucus in May. Now the caucus is being reheld on Sunday. In this interim period, she chose to come out against the boat club takeover.
That's correct. Exactly. She didn't choose in the interim. She chose last night to come out against the boat club. We had never heard, and we've been trying to ask her her opinion for several months, but she came out last night. And then we finally heard from Robert McKeon. And he seemed to inhabit a state of mind that for the first time to me evinced a bit of empathy for how the people from the boat club might be feeling. And we'll play a clip from that moment right now.
It isn't easy to disappoint some members of the community. Many of them are anything but anonymous to me. They include a couple of my neighbors, a coworker, dedicated fire company volunteers, business owners that I fraternize, and the nurse that was so supportive when our daughter was hospitalized and diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So it pains me to know that I'm letting them down, but I am charged with representing all of the public. And after researching the alternatives, this is the only place that it can happen.
What other comments did Supervisor McKeon have to say beyond those?
He took us on a bit of a trip down memory lane for those who've lived in Red Hook and for those of us who haven't lived in Red Hook as long as he's been supervisor, and I count myself among those. He's been supervisor for just over 10 years, if my math is correct. I've lived here for just under 10 years. He talked about one other eminent domain action that the town made or attempted to make in Tivoli at the request of Tivoli to take over the St. Sylvia's properties. It's a bit of a different situation because they wanted the action to be taken, but nonetheless, that happened. And he mentioned other decisions that the town has made along the way that have been unpopular. He talked about sidewalks that at the time they were put in were unpopular. He talked about the real estate tax that funds the Community Preservation Fund and went to a referendum as being initially unpopular. And he talked about the takeover of the Red Hook Rec Park, which there was some discussion in the audience about whether that was contentious or not. But in any event, he, I think, was trying to lay the groundwork for the idea that in time, this controversial, unwanted decision may be seen differently, including by the people who were objecting to it. Again, whether we agree with that is not really the issue. It's that this is how he tried to thread the needle. And it was really interesting to listen to him speak for the first time, really laying out his opinion. We have another clip here.
For a waterfront park. It's not, please let me finish. It is not to say that everyone is comfortable with the tool of eminent domain. To say that the timing is not ideal would, of course, be an understatement, right, pal? There's plenty of concern about the role of government, and in particular with unelecteds on the federal level removing public services from those who need it. Here, however, Red Hook representatives are trying to obtain public access that has been sought after for 7 decades.
So after McKeon spoke, did the board then take an official vote?
Yes, they then took an official vote. There was some contention again in the audience that I believe it was neither McKeon himself and one other person hadn't actually stated their aye. So McKeon then did poll the board or informally mentioned who the aye and nay votes were. And he then said also at the very end, he made kind of a nod to the boat club or issued a little bit of an olive branch, saying that he hoped in the coming weeks that there would be kind of a coming together, he said, of the boat club, the citizens of the hamlet of Berrytown, many of whom have been in opposition to this over traffic concerns, and the citizens of the town of Red Hook. Now, what that means, I don't know. But there is a lot that is still on the table to be decided. How this is going to work, we don't know. We don't know what hours are in play. We don't know what services the town's going to offer. We don't know what they're going to pay. There's a lot. And of course, Walter, as you and I have discussed, there are 2 lawsuits pending. One, an Article 78 proceeding in Poughkeepsie. One, a federal court action that I believe is lodged in New York City. So We don't know where this is all going to land, but we will be on top of it, I can assure you.
Could there be other lawsuits that are filed now as a result of last night?
I honestly don't know. And when we tried to speak last night to two of the top representatives for the boat club, including Commodore Richie Ross, he said, I don't know. I can tell you how we feel, but I can't tell you what's next.
Before we jump into the end of the meeting, I just want to step back and observe something. There were 5 members of the Red Hook Town Board, 3 men and 2 women, and the vote was along those lines. The men voted for the boat club takeover, and the women voted against it. Can we read anything into that?
Oh, well, I could do a lovely women are softer, gentler people thing, but I don't know that that's true. I mean, that may just have been luck. Did they listen more to the boat club members than the people who voted against it? Do they not take, as you and I were just discussing before we went on air today, did the historic view and the dictate or dictum of these planning documents bear more weight with the men than with the women? Were the women more influenced by the here and now today? Possible, right? I think we'll have to see in the coming days how this shakes out. And we'll also get some signals, I think, on Sunday when we look at how the caucus results turn up.
So tell us, what was the mood like in the room as the meeting came to a conclusion?
Well, people were continuing in the audience to harangue the supervisor, if that's the right word, or issue their declarations of frustration. There were curse words, anger, all of that continued, but there was also a bit of an air of resignation. I think it was the vote everybody was expecting, and there was a little bit of a final last stand before the vote was taken. But once it was over, people were chatting, they were talking. I didn't see anybody leave the room in tears. I think there was a bit of disgust and certainly disdain for the supervisor. But I didn't see anything that was untoward. Nothing became violent. There was nothing like that at all.
So just to help our listeners understand where we go now, we don't know timeline. We don't know how the boat club might respond legally. We don't know exactly what the town will do tactically next. Is that correct?
There are a few things that are supposed to be part of the process, Walter. One of them is there will need to be an appraisal because the rules of eminent domain dictate that you pay a fair market value. So what that fair market value is, we don't know. The boat club, of course, one of the proceedings in court is challenging the zoning decision that was made by the town board before the eminent domain action, which in the eyes of the boat club was meant to intentionally lower the property value of the boat club by saying it could never be a marina. So once you say that, then you lower some of the uses to which that land can be placed, can be put. So that's one of the things they're challenging in court. And we do know some of what's going on in the court, right? We just don't know where exactly it is and when a decision might be coming down. So I think the next thing we'll be looking for is the plan on appraisal, what that looks like, and whether there now is a conversation that takes place across a table between the boat club and the town to iron out the logistics, the literal logistics of how this takeover is going to work. Could there be some specific times of day when the boat club can use the property and nobody else? Could there be certain activities that will never take place there? Could there be a rule that because they don't have room for any more boats, there are no boats allowed by town people and no one can store a boat there? There are just many, many logistics, including many I'm sure I haven't even begun to think about, to iron out.
It will be interesting to watch the reaction around town because for those of you who may not be here in Red Hook, there have been signs all around town, mostly in opposition to the takeover. There have been big signs on Route 199 as you drive into Red Hook, lots of signs on people's lawns. It'll be interesting to watch the reaction from the community after last night's vote.
That's right. And we'll have a lot to say. People have been saying to me, well, now it's over for the Daily Catch, right? What else do you have to say? But it may just be beginning, right? We've been covering this issue for 6 or 7 months now. We will not let anything fall uncovered. We will be out there rowing our way to the next story.
I want to conclude today's podcast with a quote from Commodore Richie Ross. This is a quote he made at the conclusion of last night's meeting. So this is Richie Ross speaking, quote, "The Red Hook Town Board broke the hearts of the boat club and the community. Red Hook is not the same tonight. How do you respond to that, Emily?
Yeah, I'm sure it must be a very sad moment for the boat club and for Richie, who's been working on this nonstop, as a full-time job, a family, etc. I think it must be heartbreaking when you have your heart set on something, and these people have worked at this boat club, some of them for generations, and it must just feel very unfair. It must feel like something has been really wrenched and pulled out of your heart, right? Or your heart's been taken out of your body. I can really relate. I am a woman who can empathize with how they feel. So I think that's my personal reaction to it. As a citizen of Red Hook, I'm going to step back and be interested in what happens next and bring that dispassion that we try to bring at the Daily Catch to everything we cover, and continue to listen to everybody who has a voice, because that's what we do.
Exactly. Well, this concludes this special episode of The Catch Up. We hope you enjoyed listening. Thank you to Matty Rosenberg and Jem Hammoud at Radio Free Rhinecilff for their help producing this special episode. And thank you to Esther Martel for her help with editing. Emily, I enjoyed today's special catch-up.
It was really wonderful to catch up on something so important to our town.